Talk a little bit about Mualana Karenga, about Kwanzaa, and about Kwanzaa, because there's a lot of confusion about all three of these subjects. Dr. Mualana Karenga is the leading philosopher of Kwanzaa, one of the three most popular or well-known philosophical systems developed by Africans, I think, in the last 50 years. I'm including in that, of course, Afrocentricity and negritude and Dr. Karenga's own philosophy of Kwanzaa. Now, Kwanzaa begins with the notion that the fundamental crisis in the African world, wherever we look, whether on the continent of Africa itself, whether in Colombia, in South America, or Brazil in South America, Ecuador, wherever you have African people, in Jamaica or Trinidad or the United States or Haiti, wherever you have African people, the fundamental crisis is cultural. That is, African people have been taken off of their terms. So one way to combat that is with a philosophical appreciation of the necessity for what Dr. Karenga has always called Suruj Ta, this ancient classical notion from Nile Valley civilizations, which deals with the question of restoring and repairing, which came out of the fact that every year the Nile River overran its banks and flooded in a great inundation. And then when the water subsided, the people had to repair and restore. Well, this is the notion of justice and the concept of justice, whether we speak of it in terms of social justice or economic justice, in terms of cultural justice. African people, according to Karenga, had to deal with this question of restoration. And so part of restoration in the Kwanzaa philosophy, which is, of course, a philosophy based fundamentally on our classical traditions, the best that Africa has to offer, means that what we have to do is to sometimes recreate what has been replaced, or we have to restore what was destroyed. And so when it comes to holidays, for example, mature people always have holidays to reflect their activities, their events, their significant personalities, and so forth. And so Kwanzaa comes out of that tradition. Now, it is not true, as some of the enemies of Dr. Karenga, or I should say some of the people who are in opposition to the notion of African people restoring and repairing the cultural crisis in the African community, people who are opposed to that, some of those people say, well, you know, Kwanzaa really is too much like a European holiday, or it's too much like a Jewish holiday, or too much like a Chinese holiday, or whatever. When they don't understand that people who work with culture understand that all holidays are created. There are no holidays that are not created. That's why they exist. They exist because people created them. Somebody had to say, okay, we're going to celebrate this, and this is the way we're going to celebrate it. The fact that Dr. Mualana Karenga, an African person, decides that this is what we should do, and we ought to do this, and makes a rationale for it, one that is so significant that more than 40 million people throughout the world practice Kwanzaa and celebrate Kwanzaa every December, is no reason for us to deny that it is not inspired by Africa. It's an African-inspired holiday. It's not a Jewish-inspired holiday. It's not an Arab-inspired holiday. It's not a German-inspired holiday. Kwanzaa is an African-inspired holiday based on the concept of the first fruits. And we all know, I mean, in Africa, when I go to Ghana or Nigeria or South Africa, and we know about harvest festivals. Well, we know about the yam festivals, for example, in Ghana. where I'm in stool, as Nana Okru Asante Piazza, the Chidomhini of Tafo and Achem. We know about festivals. And so Kwanzaa takes in its own context the notion of African holidays and African festivals and creates for us in the world a common holiday experience for people of African descent. Somebody says, well, why do they use candles? Well, holidays, people can choose many different things for holidays. It's like saying we can't do libation because if we do libation and pouring water or gin on the ground for the ancestors or for the divinities, that somehow we can't do that because we find that the people in India did that. Or we find that the people in Greece poured libations, or that libations were poured by the Romans, or even the Chinese, or even Jewish people poured libations, so we can't do libations. No, you can't operate on the basis that because somebody else has a form that may be similar to yours, that is your particular inspiration. The inspiration for Kwanzaa, clearly, is an inspiration that comes out of African tradition. And the 7 principles, the Nguzo Saba, even the name Nguzo Saba is an African name. This comes out of the African tradition. This has nothing to do with any other tradition. And anyone who says anything other than that, it seems to me, is someone who would like to degrade the great contribution that Dr. Mualana Karenga has made to the African world, which I believe is perhaps one of the most significant contributions, cultural contributions, made in the black world in the last 100 years. I mean, black people all over the world now name their children Imani, or they name their children Nia. And they get this not just because these are Kiswahili words, they get it because Dr. Mualana Karenga has in some ways contextualized these terms in a holiday that we celebrate. And so today, I honor and I celebrate my brother, my friend, my colleague, the great philosopher, Dr. Mualana Karenga.